The moment Stephen A. Smith opened his mouth, the entire WNBA timeline froze. This wasn't a casual hot take. This wasn't playful debate. This was a full-blown warning shot fired directly at Angel Reese's career, and everyone watching could feel it. One social media move, one outfit, one reaction too far, and suddenly, the most polarizing star in women's basketball found herself standing alone under the harshest spotlight in sports media. Angel Reese didn't just trend, she detonated the conversation. Screenshots spread faster than game highlights. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Fans argued, critics pounced, sponsors quietly watched. And then Stephen A. did what Stephen A. always does when he smells danger. He told the truth loudly, brutally, and without mercy. He didn't scream, he didn't insult, he did something worse. He sounded disappointed, the kind of disappointment that lands heavier than hate. He questioned judgment, he questioned priorities, he questioned whether Angel Reese understood the cost of attention when the entire league is watching every move. And just like that, the narrative shifted from confidence to consequences. Because this wasn't just about Instagram, this was about reputation, longevity, power, and the terrifying reality that in professional sports, perception can end a career faster than injury. While Angel Reese faced backlash and vanished from social media, another name hovered silently in every sentence Stephen A. spoke. Caitlin Clark.com. Focused, untouchable. And as comparisons exploded, one question began echoing everywhere. Did Angel Reese just make the most dangerous move of her career? Angel Reese didn't wake up famous. She fought her way into relevance, carrying hunger, chip-on-the-shoulder energy, and a defiant confidence that made her impossible to ignore. From LSU to the WNBA, she wasn't just playing basketball, she was performing survival in real time. Every rebound felt personal, every stare-down felt like a message. She built her brand on being unapologetic in a system that historically demanded women be quiet, grateful, and compliant. And it worked. Angel Reese became more than a player, she became a symbol. To her fans, she was proof that you could be bold, loud, stylish, and still dominate. To critics, she was everything they were uncomfortable with: confidence mistaken for arrogance, self-expression framed as distraction. From day one, she lived in extremes, loved loudly, hated loudly, watched constantly. But behind the camera-ready swagger was pressure most players never face. Reese entered the league during a cultural shift, when women's basketball suddenly mattered to mainstream media, and every move was magnified. She wasn't just judged on box scores, she was judged on tweets, outfits, facial expressions, tone, silence, everything. And the crown everyone said she wore, it was heavy. She leaned into visibility because visibility had always been her shield. When people talked, she stayed relevant. When critics barked, she posted. When stress mounted, social media became both outlet and weapon. But over time, that constant performance blurred the line between control and chaos. The attention that once empowered her started demanding more: louder posts, bigger moments, riskier moves. Meanwhile, comparisons never stopped. Caitlin Clark's name followed Angel like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Every praise for Clark felt, to Reese, like an indictment. Clark was celebrated for restraint. Reese was scrutinized for expression. One was framed as focused, the other as problematic. And that imbalance dug deep. It wasn't just rivalry, it was identity pressure. Angel wanted to be seen as more than a stat line, more than rebounds, more than a villain narrative. She wanted ownership of her image in a league still learning how to handle stars with personality. But fighting perception every single day leaves scars. And slowly, those scars showed in decisions that felt more emotional than strategic. The Instagram moment didn't come from nowhere. It came from exhaustion. From constantly being watched, dissected, sexualized, criticized, defended, and doubted, sometimes all at once. Reese has spoken openly about mental health struggles, about death threats, about feeling both celebrated and attacked. That contradiction lives inside her career. And yet, with all that context, the league doesn't pause. Cameras don't soften. Critics don't wait. The WNBA is still a business built on trust, reliability, and optics. And when a player's emotional armor starts cracking publicly, the system reacts fast, not with empathy, but with evaluation. That's the emotional fault line Stephen A. Smith tapped into. Not just one post, not just one dress, but a pattern shaped by pressure, fame, and the impossible task of being both authentic and acceptable at the same time. Because Angel Reese isn't just battling opponents anymore, she's battling expectations, and the clock is ticking. The moment Stephen A. Smith opened his mouth, the temperature changed. This wasn't a casual hot take. This wasn't playful critique. This was a line in the sand, drawn live on national television, and Angel Reese was standing right in the crosshairs. When he said her name, the tone wasn't anger, it was disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting, and the comparison that followed detonated everything. Caitlin Clark. Stephen A. didn't just mention her, he weaponized her. He framed Clark as the blueprint, disciplined, brand-aware, locked in, letting basketball do the talking, and then turned back to Angel with a question that echoed across the internet. What are you doing? That wasn't media chatter anymore. That was an industry power broker, signaling concern, and players, agents, executives, they listen when Stephen A. talks like that. The conflict exploded instantly. Angel Reese wasn't being critiqued for a bad game or a missed rotation. She was being judged for who she's becoming in the public eye. The Instagram disappearance, the provocative post, the silence afterward. To Stephen A., it wasn't self-expression, it was self-sabotage. And he said it out loud. But here's the twist that changed everything. Insiders started whispering that the criticism wasn't just commentary, it was warning. Teams weren't just watching her stat lines anymore. They were watching her judgment, her reactions, her ability to handle pressure without imploding publicly. In a league where contracts are fragile and reputations travel faster than highlights, perception can kill leverage overnight. The backlash hit like a tidal wave. Social media fractured into war zones. One side screamed hypocrisy, pointing out how women athletes are policed differently, how Reese is punished for confidence while others are praised for silence. The other side piled on, calling her reckless, unfocused, addicted to attention. Every old clip resurfaced, every outfit became evidence, every tweet was dissected like a crime scene. And through it all, Caitlin Clark's name kept trending. Not because she said anything, but because she didn't. She was in the gym, in practice, in film sessions, winning awards, letting results speak while Angel's narrative spun out of control. The contrast became unbearable. It wasn't fair, but it was real. Then came the shocker. Behind the scenes, sponsors allegedly began asking questions. Quiet ones, careful ones, the kind that don't leak until they do. Is this who she is now? Is this sustainable? What's the long-term plan? That's when the situation crossed from cultural debate into career territory. Because once money hesitates, doors start closing silently. Stephen A. doubled down. He didn't apologize. He didn't soften the blow. He leaned into the idea that brand discipline matters, that talent without restraint burns out fast, that the league doesn't owe patience to players who create constant turbulence. And whether people liked it or not, his words carried institutional weight. Angel Reese, for the first time, wasn't just trending, she was vulnerable. The silence after the storm said more than any clapback ever could. No tweets, no lives, no explanations, just absence. And absence, in this league, is terrifying. Because the real twist isn't the criticism, it's what happens next. Does Angel Reese recalibrate and reclaim control? Or does the narrative harden without her consent? Because once the league decides who you are, taking that power back is the hardest fight of all, and the cameras are still rolling. The silence didn't calm anything down, it made it worse. Angel Reese disappearing after Stephen A. Smith's comments wasn't interpreted as reflection, it was interpreted as retreat. In the WNBA ecosystem, where perception moves faster than facts, that silence became its own scandal. Analysts started whispering that this wasn't damage control anymore, this was panic. Behind closed doors, the conversation escalated from image problem to risk factor. Front offices don't leak, but they talk. And the second major twist hit when multiple league-connected insiders hinted at the same thing. Angel Reese's name had quietly become complicated in executive circles. Not untouchable, but no longer automatic. That shift matters. Because just weeks earlier, Reese was viewed as a cornerstone personality. Polarizing, yes, but marketable. Now, she was being discussed in the same breath as unpredictable, volatile, and worst of all, distracting. Not because of one post, not because of one outfit, but because the pattern was forming, faster than the production on the court could counterbalance it. The escalation exploded when a prominent former WNBA player went public on a podcast and said what many were only thinking: if the noise around you is louder than your game, the league will move on without you. That clip went viral in minutes. Fans immediately connected the dots. This wasn't just commentary, this was a warning shot. Then came the second twist. A respected sports business reporter dropped a cryptic line during I've heard at least 2 endorsement conversations were paused, not cancelled, paused. That one word sent shockwaves. Paused means uncertainty. Paused means hesitation. Paused means someone upstairs is nervous. And suddenly, the narrative shifted again. This wasn't about morality. This wasn't about expression. This was about trust. Teams and sponsors don't fear bold personalities, they fear uncontrollable ones. Reese's defenders fired back instantly, accusing the league of double standards, pointing out how male athletes build entire brands on chaos and controversy. The debate turned explosive. Hashtags trended, think pieces flooded time. Everyone picked a side. But inside the league, sides don't matter. Stability does. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's shadow loomed larger without her ever stepping into the fight. She kept scoring, kept winning, kept showing up to interviews, saying nothing controversial, nothing viral, nothing explosive, and in doing so, she unintentionally became the measuring stick again, not because she asked to be, but because she represented safety. That contrast pushed the escalation into overdrive. One executive allegedly told a reporter, "Off the record, talent gets you in the door, reliability keeps you there." That quote spread like wildfire. Fans knew exactly who it was about. Angel Reese was no longer being discussed as a basketball problem. She was being discussed as a management problem. Then the pressure cracked the locker room layer. Reports surfaced that teammates were being asked, quietly, how distractions were affecting focus. No accusations, no quotes on record, just temperature checks. That alone was explosive. When a star player's behavior triggers internal evaluations, the situation has officially gone nuclear. Angel Reese finally broke the silence, not with a statement, not with an interview, but with a single, carefully worded social media post that said almost nothing and somehow said everything. No apology, no explanation, just a message about growth, learning, and moving differently. The internet dissected it like a forensic document. Was it genuine? Was it forced? Was it too late? And here's the real second twist, the one nobody expected. League insiders began hinting that the WNBA itself was watching closely, not to punish, but to protect the product, not Angel, the league, because when star narratives spiral this publicly, they affect negotiations, broadcasts, sponsorship optics, and locker room morale across teams. That means the stakes just multiplied. Angel Reese wasn't just fighting critics anymore. She was fighting momentum, and momentum, once it turns against you, doesn't stop on its own. The question now isn't whether she can clap back, it's whether she can outlast the narrative long enough to rewrite it before decisions are made without her in the room. And that decision window is closing fast. The fallout didn't roll in quietly, it slammed into the league like a tidal wave. Within hours, every sports show, every timeline, every comment section was locked into the same argument, and Angel Reese's name was sitting dead center of the storm. This wasn't debate anymore. This was judgment. Fans weren't just reacting, they were choosing sides with venom, emotion, and zero patience for nuance. Stephen A. Smith's words became the gasoline. Clips looped non-stop, his tone dissected frame by frame. Some called it tough love, others called it public humiliation, but everyone agreed on one thing. Once Stephen A. says your name like that, the spotlight turns unforgiving, and Angel Reese was standing directly under it. Social media turned ruthless. Supporters flooded timelines defending her autonomy, her confidence, her right to exist unapologetically. But the other side was louder, sharper, and more relentless. They weren't arguing values, they were arguing results. Where's the growth? Where's the accountability? Where's the basketball? Those questions stacked up faster than any stat line could answer. Then the league reactions started bleeding through. Former players spoke carefully but pointedly. Phrases like responsibility, discipline, and long-term vision kept popping up. No one named her directly, they didn't have to. The subtext was loud enough to shake locker rooms. Coaches around the league were asked about distractions in press conferences. Executives were asked about branding versus performance. The entire WNBA ecosystem felt the tremor. And Angel's silence, it amplified everything. Every hour without a clear response made the narrative harder to control. Fans interpreted the quiet as avoidance. Critics framed it as entitlement. Even neutral observers started asking if the moment had grown bigger than her ability to manage it. When perception takes the wheel, truth gets dragged behind it. The emotional impact hit hardest with younger fans. Parents debated role models. Youth coaches talked about focus and choices. Reese wasn't just being judged as a player anymore. She was being judged as an example. That shift is brutal. Once that line is crossed, Recovery becomes 10 times harder because you're no longer defending actions, you're defending identity. Meanwhile, comparisons to Caitlin Clark exploded again, louder and more unforgiving than before. Every Clark highlight became a contrast clip. Every calm interview became a silent rebuke. It wasn't fair, but it was reality. The public doesn't wait for context. It consumes contrast. Brands watched closely. Marketing experts weighed in publicly, explaining how instability scares sponsors more than controversy itself. It wasn't about morality, it was about predictability. Angel Reese, once seen as bold but bankable, was now being described as high variance. That term echoed everywhere. High variance means high risk. High risk makes people hesitate, and hesitation is deadly in professional sports. The emotional weight started showing. Fans noticed subtle changes, fewer appearances, tighter language, less fire. Whether real or imagined, the perception stuck. People began asking if she was exhausted, overwhelmed, or simply done fighting everyone at once. Then came the most damaging fallout of all, the split among her own supporters. Some wanted accountability, others wanted defiance. That fracture weakened the shield that had always protected her. When your base starts arguing with itself, the outside pressure multiplies. Angel Reese wasn't cancelled. Angel Reese wasn't cancelled, but she was no longer protected by momentum. The fallout had stripped away the buffer that stars rely on goodwill. And without goodwill, every move becomes heavier, every mistake louder, every silence suspicious. The storm wasn't slowing, it was waiting, and the next move, whatever it is, won't just shape the conversation, it will decide whether this chapter becomes a lesson or a legacy-defining collapse. Just when the narrative felt locked in, when the verdict seemed decided by timelines and talking heads, the story snapped sideways. Late at night, while the internet was still arguing, a single detail slipped out, quiet, deliberate, and explosive. Angel Reese hadn't just gone silent. She had been advised to. Multiple sources whispered that a private call had taken place hours before Stephen A. Smith's comments went fully viral. Not a warning, not a negotiation, a recalibration. Because behind the outrage, something else was happening. League executives weren't panicking. They were paying attention. What the public framed as a collapse was, internally, being studied as a stress test. How does a star handle pressure when every move is weaponized? How does she respond when branding collides with expectations? The league has lost talents before, not to injury, but to narrative, and this time, they weren't eager to repeat the mistake. Then the second shoe dropped. A respected media insider hinted that Reese's disappearance from Instagram wasn't damage control, it was leverage, a pause designed to reset ownership of the narrative. No reaction videos, no apology tour, no frantic explanation, just absence. In an economy addicted to constant access, absence is power, if you know how to use it, and Angel Reese knows the game. Behind closed doors, her camp reportedly pushed back hard against the idea that professionalism only wears one uniform. They pointed to revenue spikes, engagement metrics, youth demos, the uncomfortable truth. Controversy didn't shrink the spotlight, it intensified it. The question was never whether Angel could generate attention. It was whether the league was ready to define what kind of attention it truly wanted. That's where the real fracture formed. Because while fans argued morals, executives argued futures. At the same time, comparisons to Caitlin Clark reached a boiling point, but not in the way people expected. One veteran analyst quietly noted something that sent shockwaves through front offices. Clark and Reese weren't competing for the same lane. They were building parallel empires. One rooted in purity, the other in provocation. Both effective, both risky, both necessary to expand a league still fighting for oxygen. That comment didn't trend, but it traveled. Then came the moment that changed everything. A brief, carefully worded statement surfaced, not from Angel, but from someone close to her circle. It didn't apologize. It didn't explain. It didn't attack. It simply said, the conversation is bigger than one outfit, one post, or one opinion. The next chapter will make that clear. No context. No follow-up. Just a promise. Speculation erupted instantly. Was Reese planning a controlled rebrand? A documentary? A sit-down interview that flips the narrative on its head? Or was she about to double down and force the league to confront its own contradictions? Even Stephen A's tone shifted slightly the next day. Still critical, but measured. Less fire, more caution. As if he knew the chessboard had changed. Because here's the truth, nobody wants to admit yet. Angel Reese hasn't lost relevance. She's standing at a crossroads where one move can either silence the noise forever, or turn it into fuel that redefines her career. And the scariest part, she hasn't played her hand yet. The silence isn't retreat, it's anticipation, and when Angel Reese finally breaks it, the question won't be whether she survived the backlash, it will be whether the league is ready for the version of her that emerges. Next, that's where it flips to you, because stories like this don't end on TV, screens, or podcast clips. They end in the court of public opinion. And right now, Angel Reese's future isn't being decided by one analyst, one outfit, or one post. It's being shaped by how fans, media, and the league choose to respond next. So here's the real question. Are we watching accountability? Or are we watching a double standard play out in real time? Some see a young star learning painful lessons under an unforgiving spotlight. Others see a pattern of choices that demand consequences. And then there's the uncomfortable middle ground where talent, controversy, branding, and pressure collide in a league still figuring out what kind of stars it wants to build. That's why your voice matters. Do you believe Angel Reese crossed a line, or was she punished for refusing to fit a mold? Is Stephen A. Smith speaking hard truth, or fueling a narrative that's already spiraling? And how much room should athletes really have to define themselves outside the game? Drop your honest take in the comments. No filters, no safe answers. If you think this conversation goes deeper than one headline, hit like. If you want the next twist before it breaks mainstream, subscribe and turn notifications on. Because whether you're rooting for redemption or reckoning, this story isn't over. Not even close. It isn't over. Not even close.